From Tokyo, Japan, this is Frank Ling.
And from Chicago, Illinois, I'm Charles Lee.
And welcome to the Grok Science Show.
That's right, it's a weekly look at the world of science, technology, and their effects on our daily lives.
Coming up today's show, anti-diarrhea and too hot for plants.
In addition, we'll be joined by Richard Preston, who will discuss the edge of science.
So stay tuned for all of this.
Plus the Grokatron 5000.
And your world-famous question of the week.
Coming right up.
Here.
On the Grok
Science Show. Welcome back to the program. I'm Frank Ling.
And I guess that makes me Charles Lee. How you doing, Frank?
A little stomach problem going on.
Oh, what's going on there?
Oh, I don't know. Something I ate probably.
Or something that ate you. Spit you back out.
Something was trying to eat me from an inside. But it looks like relief may be on the way.
Pepto-Bismol?
No, in fact, a small compound called pyridopyrimidine derivatives. Shorthand is BPIPP.
BPIPP.
Well, chemists like to make shorthands for everything.
And they're so clever with them, just taking the first initials. I could never come up with something like that.
Bacteria like E. coli and anthrax can cause severe diarrhea, and in fact, it's one of the leading killers in third world countries where children actually do die from diarrhea. And the basic mechanism is that these bacteria bind to your intestinal walls, which stimulates them to produce these other compounds called cyclic nucleotides. And these have the unfortunate effect of making your body put a lot of water and salt into your intestines. So that causes dehydration and thus the diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been testing a library of these new pyridopyrimidine derivatives, and what they found is that they have the ability to suppress cyclic nucleotides. Probably further tweaks in these type of compounds, they may be able to find a treatment or a reasonable remedy for diarrhea or the bacteria that's causing it.
Right.
Anyways, this was really interesting work carried out by Alex Katz at the University of Texas, and it's actually from our very favorite journal.
Wow. I should read that journal more often.
I have one in my bathroom.
That's the best place to put it. The Proceedings.
Of the National
Academy
of Sciences.
PNAS. What? I wonder if there's a cure for intestinal discomfort that the planet is facing.
Volcanoes are like heartburn or something.
I think humans are the disease. Of course, I'm referring to climate change.
It's getting a little bit hot here.
It is indeed. Because the mountain plants are moving.
The mountain plants are moving?
Indeed they are.
Are they going north?
They're going up anyway.
Up.
So apparently the mountain plants are much more susceptible to climate change because of the very rapid variations in temperature that can occur in the mountain regions. So what happens is over time, obviously, plants will move to the correct climate zone in the mountain. But this is a problem because depending on the characteristics of the plant, they may not migrate as quickly as other plants that also have to migrate to their best location. And so you might get this spread in which now you have plants competing with other plants that they weren't ecologically designed to compete with. So this is what researchers have recently found in a mountain region in France, work done by Jonathan Lenoir of the Paris Institute of Technology in France. And saw
the PIT.
That's the pits.
Well, you know, there's also Tokyo Institute of Technology.
Well, that's a great institution. I mean, it's a palindrome, right?
Indeed.
So what apparently these researchers have found is that certain species, as you might expect, like strictly mountain-living species, were migrating much faster than those that, for example, could live in multiple climates, mountain and lowland climates.
Oh, okay.
Similarly, plants were able to move much quicker than trees, for example, which have a long generation time.
Yeah, trees don't walk very fast, you know.
Not unless you blow the horn of summoning, I think. What was that in Lord of the Rings? I don't know.
The Ents, right?
Yes. A number of ecologists are worried to spell some bad news in case these plants don't get along in their new habitats.
Oh, man. Can't we just all get along?
That's what we're trying to do. Anyway, very fascinating work published in a recent edition of Science. And that's all for a look at recent developments in the world of science and technology. This is the Grok Science Show. Well, coming up in just a few minutes, Richard Preston will join us to discuss the edge of science. So stay tuned. To the Grok's Science Show. Well, the world of scientific endeavors is vast and far-flung, from killer viruses to the mathematical nature of pi. And reporting on these wide-ranging subjects can certainly be a challenge, but not for our guest today, Mr. Richard Preston. Mr. Preston is the acclaimed writer whose work for The New Yorker and the best-selling book The Hot Zone have made him well known for his science writing. His recent collection of works, Panic in Level 4, Cannibals, Killer Viruses, and Other Journeys to the Edge of Science, brings together some of his most fascinating pieces into one volume. Mr. Preston, thank you very much for joining us today on the Grok Science Show.
Hi, Charles. Nice to be with you.
Well, it's really a pleasure to have you on the program, and certainly a very fascinating collection of pieces that you've written here. I'm curious, actually, how did you choose the stories that are in this collection?
Well, I guess you could call them, in one way or another, all personal obsessions. I think that if anyone is going to be a writer, you really have to have your head examined to be a writer. It's hard work. So I like to write about things that really interest me. And in every case, the stories in this book, which are all nonfiction, true essays about science, are about invisible things. They're about the deep depths of the interior universe, the universe that goes to infinity within. You know, I've long been interested in emerging infectious diseases, which I call dark biology. And so there are a couple of pieces in Panic in Level 4 about that, about the search for the unknown host of the Ebola virus, which keeps emerging out of equatorial African rainforest. Ebola lives in some unknown host, a bat, a bird, a butterfly. No one knows. It's quite a mystery to where this virus comes from, and then every now and then it somehow or other gets into the human species. It does what's called a trans-species jump, and then it can move from person to person. And another one of the pieces in the book is The Mountains of Pi. And it's about the number pi, that is, the diameter of a circle to its circumference. And I found out about two mathematicians who have since become great friends of mine, David and Gregory Chudnovsky, who live in New York City. They claim that they're a single mathematician who happens to occupy two human bodies. They work very closely with each other. And I found out that they were building a supercomputer in their apartment out of mail-order parts, and then they were using this machine to calculate the number pi to more than 2 billion digits. So, you know, pi begins 3.14159, and it goes off to infinity. The digits never repeat. There doesn't seem to be any pattern or order in the digits of pi, and yet there is definitely an order in pi, because the number comes from the circle, which is the most orderly and symmetrical object in all of mathematics. So we know that there's an order in pi, but it seems as though the human mind is completely unable, even with our advanced technology, to see or to grasp what may be an incredibly complex pattern in pi. So these guys were using their homemade supercomputer to do this. They're very well-known, internationally respected mathematicians, but they didn't have any money. So they built the thing out of mail-order parts. The building superintendent didn't know that they were calculating pi in the apartment. They were using incredible amounts of electricity. They were afraid they were going to start a fire. They had 26 fans running to cool the apartment, and they had a meat thermometer stuck into the core of the supercomputer. Gregory told me that when it reached pork, you had to be concerned.
And why do they think calculating pi to such infinite number of digits would actually lead to insights into its relevance, its structure?
Well, this is the question, of course, that I was fascinated with. And, you know, I spent a lot of time hanging out with them in that apartment as a reporter. I love to do this kind of thing as a writer. I love to get to know not just the science, but the people who do it, who themselves are obsessed. And in this case, they were doing it partly because Gregory, the younger brother, who is in a wheelchair most of the time, he has a debilitating illness, is considered to be one of the world's leading designers of supercomputers. He designed supercomputers in his head the way Mozart wrote music. So they were testing their machines simply by calculating pi. Pi is one of the most difficult problems you can hit a supercomputer with. Pi can crash any supercomputer. And then the other question, which I think was more interesting in a way to me, was that the brothers felt that if they could somehow get a glimpse of a pattern in pi, it would be like getting a glimpse of the face of God.
And did they get that glimpse?
Well, maybe I don't want to tell you how the piece ends up, but let's just say that if the pattern that they saw in pi was the face of God or a message from God, they're still not sure exactly what God is trying to say.
Maybe good news for all the theologians out there. Which one of these do you think was your favorite piece of the lot, if it's possible to choose?
Well, certainly the pi piece, because I just loved the subject. It was such a delight to explore mathematics. By the way, I got D's in math in high school, Charles, and I had a lot of trepidation working on this piece, worried that I just simply wasn't going to be able to understand the material or communicate it to the general public. But what I found out was that some of the problems in higher mathematics, including in number theory, which is what pi is all about, are actually incredibly simple problems. They could be almost posed by a child, and yet the world's most talented mathematicians have spent thousands of years trying to solve these problems without ever coming up with a solution. So the problems are hard, though they're very easy to ask. And then the other piece that I felt most passionate about was the self-cannibals, which is about probably the most grisly genetic disease that I've ever heard of. The disease is called the Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, and it's caused by a defect in a single letter of the human code, the human genome, the DNA. The human genome has more than 3 billion letters of code in it, which would be like 6,000 copies of Moby Dick. Change one letter in one wrong page, and you wind up with a person with this Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. It's named after the two doctors who discovered it in 1962 in a child. The person who has this defect has a behavioral pattern where they are completely compelled against their will to cannibalize their own bodies, to chew off their extremities, to bite off their lips and tongues, and to otherwise attack themselves or injure and mutilate themselves. And it's uncontrollable. They are terrified of their hands. They can't stop it when the demon takes possession of them. It's like possession of a demon. And I've spent time now with people with this disease. I got to know two guys with the disease very well, got to like them and know them a lot. But when the demon of the disease takes over the mind, the expression on their faces would change. They would get a kind of a staring, glittering look in the eye. It was really scary. And then they would proceed to either attack themselves or attack the people they like the most, the people they love. And so as I got to know these men with the disease, they began attacking me, which was a sure sign that they liked me. It took me about 8 years to write this one chapter in the book. The problem was that I had to find a way to get inside the mind of a self-cannibal, to really find out what it feels like to have this disease. You know, we can write about it. Scientists understand it only at some level, although the disease itself remains a great mystery. But to try to get inside the mind of the self-cannibal and experience and see the world the way they did was a huge challenge. The Lesch-Nyhan disease is thought to be a kind of Rosetta Stone for human behavior, as yet undeciphered. But if we could understand how changing a single letter of the human DNA can result in such a profound change in behavior which is programmed by the DNA, like programming a computer, then I think we might understand more clearly the sources of many diseases, especially many mental illnesses, and even human behavior at a larger scale. And when you look at history itself, when you see human actions, you see people often doing things that are obviously self-destructive. We all do this to some extent. There's a little bit of Lesch-Nyhan in all of us. I mean, we all do these crazy things, and afterwards we say, why did I do that? You know, that was so harmful to me. And it's everything like sitting down in front of the TV and consuming a quart of ice cream. Or we do things that, like many episodes in Seinfeld, we try to do things and then unfortunately everything turns out exactly the worst possible way for us. This is, in effect, a kind of Lesch-Nyhan. But in the disease itself, the behavior is just stark and really kind of frightening in a way. And yet